Namaskar everyone. Jai Bharat, Jai Dharma. I would like to thank the organizers of the the World Hindu Conference, for the wonderful work they're doing and for putting together such a wonderful event. Wonderful job, and I would like to pay my respects to my distinguished colleagues on the panel, and I would like to pay my respects to the distinguished audience members. So, I think Captain Praveenji has done such a wonderful job of delineating everything that that needs to be done from the media perspective, that I'm going to stray a little bit from just speaking about the media. I'm going to go a little broader, because that's what I typically do in my content. So a few years ago, I think it's before the pandemic, I was on a TV news channel, an Indian news channel, and we were discussing the Middle East crisis. The Middle East has been in crisis, as we know, since the 1950s, 40s, even before that. It's always in crisis, permanently in crisis. And I half-jokingly said that I have a short solution to the Middle East crisis. Convert them all to Hindu Dharma. It will be over in an instant. And my esteemed co-panelists on that TV debate all blew their tops, right? How can you say that, blah, blah, blah. So that is the power of narrative. The narrative, the dominant narrative worldwide is that our Dharma, Hindu Dharma, is regressive, it is backward, it is capable of nothing good, and so on and so forth. That's the power of narrative. That's taken at face value, that is taken as self-evident. And that is what we are up against. So what is a narrative? Like Praveenji said, a narrative is a story. And a story can be based in facts or in fiction. And fiction is lies, facts are just factual evidence. So what we need to do is we need to create our own narrative. Now, how would I define a narrative? I will again say something similar to what Praveenji said. It's like a 3-act structure. First of all, we have to ask ourselves, who are we? Who are we all? The Bharatiya people, the Hindu people, who are we all? Secondly, where are we coming from? What's our past history, so that we understand who we are better? And thirdly, where are we going? What's the way forward? What's the future like? What is our envisioned future, like 100 years down the line, 1,000 years down the line? We need to have these components of the narrative very clear. So to do that, first of all, we have to examine our history. And right now, our history is full of distortions. Our history textbooks are full of distortions. The historians, our esteemed, eminent historians, are all anti-Bharat, anti-Dharma, anti-Hindu Dharma. They are all leftists, Marxists. They are the students and disciples of foreigners, the jackals that Praveenji spoke about, right? So that's what we are up against. So first of all, we need to correct our history. We need to make it fact-based, not falsehoods-based. So our history is immense. I mean, like Praveenji said, we probably have a 50,000-year-old history of Bharatiya civilization and culture and the people. The archaeological evidence that I have found thus far goes back at least 10,000 years. The city, the ancient, archaeological site of Bharata in Haryana, it's almost 10,000 years old. So first of all, we need to examine our history and correct the distortions. The recent history, the 20th century onwards history itself, it's almost something that's in living memory. That's full of distortions. We need to re-examine the great figures about whom hagiographies have been written, like Mr. Gandhi, Mr. Nehru. We have to re-examine the legacy of great figures like Mr. Bose, like Mr. Savarkar, and so on. So we need to re-examine the recent history. The history of the 18th and 19th century also is full of falsehoods and distortions. Certain individuals who I will not name, who said that Sanskrit is a backward language and Hindu Dharma needs to be smashed out, they are now regarded as great social reformers, right? So that's the kind of distortions we are dealing with. And then we have the history that starts from the first year of the Christian era, 1 CE, in which so much has been completely left out. The great Gupta dynasty, I mean, how much do we know about them? The golden age of India, the great Emperor Kanishka, who did so much for Dharma, he turned Dharma into a global force, the second great emperor who did that after Emperor Ashoka, right? How much do we know about the Karkota dynasty who conquered Central Asia? How much do we know about the Cholas, and so many things? So all of this needs to be done. Now, how do we do this? Right? And this is where I'm straying beyond media, but it needs to be done. We have to reform the education system. We need to create our own educational institutions. We need to create research institutions. There is something called the Institute of Advanced Study in Princeton, New Jersey, where the likes of Einstein, Oppenheimer, and so on, they did the research there, a lot of the research there. We need to create such institutes like that, which are focused only on research. And then what we can do is we can create a panel of good historians, top-class historians for each state of India and give them a 2-year, 3-year task of compiling a detailed history of each state of Bharat. Once that is done, all of that can be synthesized into a large, multiple volume set of the overall history of Bharatiya Sabhyata, Bharatiya culture, civilization itself. So this is something that needs to be undertaken, and for that the government has to be involved. The narrative building has to start with the government, and then we can take it forward, right? So the correct narrative has to be set with history. That's what needs to happen. How much do we know about our deep antiquity? The Aryan invasion theory, which later became the Aryan migration theory because they found no evidence of invasion. Now there is no evidence of migration either, so it will become the Aryan tourism theory. Eventually it will be the Aryan picnic theory, right? So that is something that's happening, right? There is so much of our history that we don't know about, especially the deep antiquity. Before the eventual demise of the Saraswati Sindhu phase of our culture. So I'll not go into the details because that will take a lot of time. So new research institutions need to be funded. What about yoga? Yoga has been distorted so badly. It has been appropriated by the West. We have hot yoga, we have cold yoga, we have goat yoga, we have dog yoga, we have drunk yoga, and whatnot. Why have we lost control of the narrative of yoga? Think about something similar. There is something called Shaolin Kung Fu. Okay? It's based, the center of that is the Shaolin Temple. It's a dharmic temple in China. And for those who don't know, Shaolin Kung Fu originates in India, by the way. Okay? So the Shaolin Temple is sets the standards of what is Kung Fu and what is not. And nobody can challenge that. Why don't we have a Yoga Standards Institute in Bharat? Why don't we do that? Is it so hard to do? So the government of Bharat, this is a low-hanging fruit for the government of Bharat. I don't understand why it's not done. I hope somebody hears this, takes it seriously and does it. It's a low-hanging fruit. So create a Yoga Standards Institute in Bharat with branches in every state, and then we will decide what is yoga and what is not. Right? So that needs to happen. Each state, like I said, needs to have its own detailed textbook of its own history, and then we can synthesize that into a multiple volume set. We need to clean up the Indian institutes of technology. It's technology, so why do we have degrees in sociology and whatnot over there? And these humanities departments are infested with anti-Bharat, anti-Dharma intellectuals, so-called intellectuals and academics. And the only research they produce is all about caste and all that nonsense, the standard anti-Dharma, anti-Bharat narrative. So that needs to be done. Why are we using a substantial percentage of the budgets of the Indian Institutes of Technology for giving degrees in something that has nothing to do with technology? So we need to look into that. We need to offer scholarships to good students, to deserving students. We need to find a way to revive Sanskrit. Sanskrit is the common civilizational language in the past 10,000 years of Bharatiya civilization, not just within Bharat, but across the civilized world. We are now currently in Suvarna Bhumi, Thailand. This city, one of its names is Indrapuri, Bangkok. And Bharatiya Sanskriti civilization was spread all across Southeast Asia, all the way up to the Philippines. And the common thread, the language was Sanskrit. It was the high language. It was the prestige language. Even today, if you go to Indonesia, we have names like Megawati, Sukarno Putri, and so on and so forth. Their names are still based in Sanskrit. They still cherish it despite having become an Islamic country. So we need to find a way to revive Sanskrit in Bharat. It is the language that is the oldest in the world. It is a language that is eminently suitable for expressing complicated ideas and concepts. It's extremely well suited for scientific terminology, and we have deliberately marginalized this great language. It is not a dead language. Every single Bharatiya language has its vocabulary, which is rooted in Sanskrit. So we need to revive Sanskrit. We need to prioritize Bharatiya languages. Right? Today in Bharat, if you go, everybody can speak English because it is the language without which you can't get a job. Right? One of the things I love about this great land of Suvarna Bhumi, Thailand, is that no one speaks English. You go and try to go to 7-Eleven or wherever, no one cares. They have self-respect. I mean, look at me. I am more comfortable in English than in the Bharatiya language, which is what the education system and the system has done to me. So I don't want the future generations to be as mentally colonized and so on as my generation. So learn from these places. Thailand, no one speaks English, right? So that's a great example. The Bharatiya calendar needs to be revived. It is the superior calendar. It is way better than the Christian calendar that we use, right? And Dr. C.K. Raju, I would like to give credit to him, has done a tremendous amount of work in proving that the Bharatiya calendar, the Hindu calendar, is the best calendar in the world, right? So we need to do that. So we need to teach Indian Bharatiya history, Bharatiya philosophy, Bharatiya religion, culture, civilization in our textbooks. Why don't we teach that? We are the only nation in the world that doesn't teach. We don't teach our own culture in our school curriculum and all that. We also need to set our geopolitical narrative. Do we understand the difference between a civilization and a nation state? I don't think our children do. The nation state system is an artificial system that began in the Treaty of Westphalia in the 17th century. And historically, we've only had kingdoms and empires. And today we have these artificial nation states. And we only think of Bharat as a nation. We are much more than that. We are a civilization. But do we even know what a civilization is? What is the definition of a civilization? We need to learn that. We need to understand that and understand the difference between a nation, a civilization. We need to have our own national and civilizational identity. We don't have that. We prioritize our sub-national, sub-civilizational identities. I speak so-and-so language. I belong to this linguistic group. I belong to this state. I belong to this so-and-so caste or whatever. That's what we prioritize over our own civilizational identity. So we need to have that, right? We need to understand realpolitik. I mean, we are taught to ask ourselves, in this situation, what would Mr. Gandhi do? Well, I would ask, what would Kali do? Right? So that's another thing. Then we need to have our own media organizations. The world has BBCs and CNNs and Al Jazeeras and Global Times. Where is our big media mouthpiece? Media is propaganda. It's all propaganda. So why don't we also play the game? Why don't we have that? And if we don't have that, then we need to all work together in putting forth the Bharatiya perspective together. That's what we need to do. And one thing I would like to point out is that we always neglect our Far East, the Northeast of Bharat. I have met very few people over here from the Northeast. You know, the Assam, Manipur, Meghalaya, all of that. There is a war going on in this region. There is a war for the hearts and souls of the natives of these regions. See what's happening in Manipur. More than half of Manipur is under foreign occupation right now, whether you realize it or not. So we should not neglect our brothers and sisters from the Northeast. We need to bring them into the mainstream because they feel marginalized, they feel alienated. Please understand this is very important. So we need to have a long-term vision. We have to ask ourselves, where do we want to be in 100 years? What values do we want to use as the fuel to take us forward in the next 100 years? We should also have a 1,000-year vision of where we want to be in 1,000 years. That's how a civilization thinks. Understand that the most important demographic is the youth. The youth. We are all in agreement. But what about the youngsters? They are completely disconnected from us. They are disconnected from their culture, from their roots. That is the most important demographic. We have to bring them back into the fold, into the right path. Aesthetics matter. When we use aesthetics in videos, design, graphic design, we should not use 19th century designs. We should use 21st century graphic technology and make it visually appealing. That's how we appeal to the hearts and minds of the youngsters, because that's how it works today, whether we like it or not. So let me conclude. We need to all work together separately, but coordinate and synergize our efforts. We are all working towards the same goal, but we need to have division of labor. Not everybody can talk about history. Not everybody can talk about geopolitics. Not everyone can talk science. We all can specialize in various things, but we need to all meet together regularly, synergize our activities together, and work together. Thank you very much. Jai Bharat, Jai Dharma.